I told my brother-in-law I'll never forgive his daughter and she's banned from my family forever. Our family is in chaos after what she did. In a quaint suburban neighborhood, a young mother named Rachel carefully placed a freshly baked apple pie on the cooling rack, her eyes gleaming with pride. She glanced at the clock and felt the flutter of excitement in her chest. The guests would be arriving soon. Rachel's blonde hair was pulled back into a neat ponytail, and she wore a simple yet elegant dress that accentuated her figure. The house was already filled with the mouth-watering aromas of various dishes, each carefully selected to suit the diverse tastes of her close-knit family. Her husband, Mark, bustled around in the living room, arranging the furniture to accommodate everyone comfortably. Their 6-month-old son, baby Isaac, cooed in his playpen, oblivious to the flurry of activity around him. Rachel's sister, Jenna, and her husband Joe, were the first to arrive, with Kevin and Kelly in tow. Jenna, a tall and graceful woman with dark hair, gave Rachel a warm embrace, whispering sweet nothings about the delicious smells wafting from the kitchen. Joe, a burly man with a gentle smile, offered his help, taking coats and setting them aside. Kevin, Rachel's nephew, a boy of 10 with a mischievous twinkle in his eye, eagerly rushed over to play with Isaac. Meanwhile, Kelly, Joe's teenage daughter from a previous marriage, hung back shyly, her eyes darting around the room, taking everything in. Rachel noted her quiet demeanor but didn't think much of it, chalking it up to the awkwardness of adolescence. The evening unfolded without a hitch. The family chatted, laughed, and shared stories over dinner. Rachel's mother regaled them with tales from her latest gardening adventures, while Rachel's father listened attentively, nodding and smiling. Kevin and Isaac played together, leaving a trail of toys scattered across the living room floor. The adults sipped wine and coffee, and the children gobbled down their desserts. It was a picture of domestic bliss, a snapshot of a typical family gathering, or so it seemed. But beneath the surface, something was brewing, something that Rachel could never have anticipated. It was a secret that would soon unravel the fabric of their family dynamic and leave Rachel questioning the very essence of trust. A week after the birthday celebration, Rachel received a disturbing call from the school. It was Kevin, his voice quivering with fear and urgency. "Aunt Rachel, you need to know something," he whispered into the phone. "Kelly's been telling everyone at school that she saw Uncle Mark's. His private parts." Rachel's hand froze, gripping the phone tightly as she processed the shocking revelation. She had never suspected anything untoward could happen in the sanctity of her own home, especially not from her sweet-faced step-niece. Her thoughts raced as she recalled the evening, how everyone had been in their designated areas, how nothing had seemed out of place. Rachel's blood boiled as she pieced together the events in her mind. How could Kelly have concocted such a vile lie? And why? The only explanation she could think of was a desperate attempt to fit in, to share a scandal with her peers and gain some semblance of power or acceptance. But at what cost? The gravity of the situation hit Rachel like a ton of bricks. Mark's reputation was on the line, and the thought of him being vilified by the community was unbearable. Rachel knew she had to act swiftly and decisively. She called a family meeting at her parents' home, where everyone could speak openly and privately. The room was filled with tension as they all gathered, the warmth of the previous week replaced by a chilly silence that hung in the air like a shroud. As Rachel recounted the story, she watched the color drain from her sister's face, the horror of the situation setting in. Jenna's eyes grew wide with disbelief as Rachel spoke, her gaze shifting to Joe, who sat slumped in his chair, his hands covering his face in despair. Rachel's heart went out to him. She knew he was torn between protecting his daughter and supporting Mark, a man who had been nothing but loving and respectful to him. The room was thick with accusations and defenses until finally, Rachel's voice cut through the cacophony. "Kelly, tell us the truth. Did you lie?" she demanded, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging within her. Kelly looked up from her lap, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She nodded slowly, her voice a barely audible whisper. "I made it up," she confessed, her body visibly shrinking with each word. Rachel felt a mix of anger and pity as she saw the fear in the girl's eyes. But she steeled herself, knowing that she couldn't let this go without repercussions. "Why?" she pressed, needing to understand the depth of this betrayal. Kelly took a shaky breath and spoke haltingly. I just wanted to fit in, to have a story like the other girls," she sobbed, her shoulders heaving. Rachel's stomach twisted. How could she have been so naive as to not see the turmoil brewing in the girl's life? But Rachel knew that she couldn't let pity overshadow the gravity of what had been done. "You realize what you've done, don't you?" Rachel asked, her voice hardening. "You could have ruined a man's life with your lie." The silence that followed was deafening. Rachel's parents looked at her, their expressions a mix of shock and sadness. They had always taught their daughters the value of family, of standing by one another, but this was a line that had been crossed. Rachel knew that she had to take a stand, not just for Mark, but for the safety of her own son. She turned to Joe, her voice firm. "Kelly can't come over anymore. Not until she learns that her actions have consequences." Joe nodded, his face a mask of defeat. Rachel could see the pain in his eyes as he wrapped his arms around his daughter, who buried her face in his chest. Jenna looked at Rachel with a plea, but Rachel's mind was made up. They had to draw a line in the sand, and it was a painful one. The following days were a whirlwind of drama. Rachel's family dynamics shifted as they navigated the aftermath of Kelly's lie. Rachel's relationship with Jenna grew strained, but she knew she had made the right decision. The school was informed, and while they understood the sensitive nature of the situation, they had to take it seriously. Rachel felt the weight of her decision heavily, but she couldn't let fear dictate her family's future. Jenna and Joe had long talks with Kelly, trying to get to the root of her behavior. Rachel offered her support, but made it clear that trust was something that had to be earned. Slowly, the family began to heal, though the wounds remained fresh. Rachel's interactions with Joe remained civil, but there was a palpable tension between them, a reminder of the fracture in their bond. But Rachel's resolve never wavered. She had to protect her family, her home, and her husband's reputation. She knew that by standing firm, she was teaching her son the importance of boundaries and the power of truth. And as baby Isaac grew, Rachel hoped that the lessons he learned from this painful chapter would serve him well in a world that was all too often filled with deceit and betrayal. One evening, after putting Isaac to bed, Rachel found Mark waiting for her in the living room. He looked up from his chair, his eyes filled with a solemn sincerity that she hadn't seen in days. "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Rachel sat down across from him, bracing herself for the conversation she had been avoiding. "I'm sorry," Mark began, his words coming out in a rush. "I'm sorry I wasn't more present when you needed me. I've been so caught up in work and trying to keep everything together that I didn't realize the stress you've been under." Rachel's eyes filled with tears as she listened to her husband's heartfelt apology. She had felt so alone in her anger and fear, and his words were a balm to her weary soul. "I know I can't change what happened," Mark continued, "but I want to help fix this. We're in this together, Rachel. I'll do whatever it takes to make things right between us and the rest of the family." Rachel's heart swelled with love for this man, who had always been her rock, even when the foundation of their life together had been shaken. "Thank you," she whispered, reaching out to take his hand. "But it's not just about fixing things with the family. We have to think about Isaac too. He's going to grow up in a world where people say and do terrible things. We have to show him how to handle it, how to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard." Mark nodded solemnly. "You're right," he said, squeezing her hand. "We'll get through this together, Rachel. And we'll come out stronger on the other side." Rachel felt a warmth spread through her, a warmth that had been missing since that fateful call from Kevin. The next day, Rachel decided to visit Jenna. The sisters sat in the garden, the same place where they had played as children. Rachel took a deep breath and spoke her truth. "I know you're hurting, and I'm sorry for that. But we have to think about what's best for our family." Jenna looked at her, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "I know," she said, her voice cracking. I didn't know what to do." "We'll figure it out," Rachel assured her, her own eyes shining with hope. "We always do." And with that, the beginnings of a new chapter unfolded. Rachel knew that the path ahead would be fraught with challenges and uncertainty, but she also knew that she had a husband and a family that she could count on. Together, they would navigate the murky waters of betrayal and come out stronger, more united than ever before. A few days later, Rachel was pushing Isaac in his stroller around the neighborhood when she spotted a young girl sitting on the sidewalk, her face etched with sadness. Rachel felt a tug at her heartstrings. There was something about this girl that reminded her of a younger, more innocent Kelly. She approached the girl and introduced herself, discovering her name was Lily and that she was a new student at the same school as Kevin and Kelly. Lily had a story eerily similar to Kelly's, a blended family, a struggle to fit in, and a yearning for acceptance. Rachel and Mark decided to invite her over for dinner, and as the weeks went by, they found themselves drawn to her quiet resilience. They learned that Lily's mother had passed away, leaving her father to juggle a new wife and 2 stepchildren, all while trying to maintain a semblance of normalcy for Lily. Rachel couldn't help but feel a pang of empathy for the girl, remembering her own tumultuous teenage years. As they spent more time with Lily, Rachel and Mark began to see the world through her eyes. They saw the complexities of adolescence, the pressure to fit in, and the pain that could come from feeling like an outsider in your own family. Rachel watched as Mark took Lily under his wing, sharing his own stories of growing up and the lessons he had learned along the way. The bond that grew between them was palpable, and Rachel found herself feeling a strange sense of redemption as she watched her husband guide this lost soul through the minefield of teenage angst. Lily's visits became a weekly ritual, and Rachel and Mark grew to love her as if she were their own. They saw in her a second chance to do right by a child in need, to show her that not all families were plagued by deceit and spite. Rachel hoped that by being there for Lily, they could somehow atone for the rift that had formed with Kelly. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. And so, as the summer rolled on and the days grew longer, Rachel and Mark's home became a beacon of warmth and love for Lily, a place where she could be herself without the weight of her own family's troubles. Rachel knew that they couldn't save every lost soul, but perhaps, just by being present and caring, they could offer a glimpse of what a true family should be, a place where everyone felt seen, heard, and loved. But it was a phone call from Lily's father that brought a new twist to Rachel's life. He had noticed a change in his daughter's demeanor and was curious about her newfound happiness. Rachel shared their story, leaving out the details of the family secret that had been the catalyst for their friendship. His voice was filled with a mix of gratitude and desperation as he spoke of his own suspicions about his wife's past and the traumas she had never fully confronted. In a moment of candor, Rachel revealed the events with Kelly and the turmoil it had caused. It was then that Lily's father shared something that made Rachel's blood run cold. His wife had a sister, who had suffered a similar fate. Rachel's mind raced as she connected the dots, realizing that the family secret they had uncovered was not just about a lie, but about a pattern of behavior that had been passed down through generations. Feeling a sudden urgency to address the issue at its root, Rachel and Mark decided to confront Jenna and Joe about the possibility that there was more to the story than they knew. The conversation was difficult, but it was clear that the adults in the room were just as lost and confused as their children. Rachel's parents sat in silence, their faces etched with a mix of shock and regret, as the implications of the revelation sank in. They agreed to seek professional help for Kelly, hoping that with therapy and guidance, she could overcome her destructive tendencies and find a healthier way to cope with her feelings of inadequacy and isolation. Rachel felt a weight lifted from her shoulders as she watched her family come together, united in their desire to support each other and learn from their mistakes. The journey ahead was far from easy, but Rachel knew that they had taken the first step towards healing. They had faced the dark truths lurking in their family's past and were ready to tackle them head-on. And as she watched Mark play with Isaac in the yard, she knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it together, as a family that had learned the true meaning of strength in adversity. But the shadow of the past loomed large. Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to uncover, more secrets that needed to be brought into the light. As she held her son, she thought about the innocence of childhood and the heavy burdens that had been placed on the shoulders of her sister and her newfound friend Lily. How could they have missed the signs? How could they have allowed such pain to fester? The next time Rachel saw Jenna, the air was thick with unspoken words. Rachel knew she had to tread carefully. "Jenna," she began, her voice tentative, "I think we need to talk." Jenna's eyes searched hers, looking for any hint of judgment or anger. Rachel took a deep breath. "I know you didn't mean for this to happen, but we can't ignore the patterns we're seeing. We have to get to the bottom of it, for our own sakes, and for the sake of our children." Jenna's face crumpled, and Rachel reached out to take her sister's hand. "I know it's hard," Rachel said gently, "but we have to face it together." With a trembling nod, Jenna agreed to seek counseling, not just for Kelly, but for themselves as well. Rachel felt a knot in her stomach loosen, the beginnings of a hope that maybe, just maybe, they could all find their way back to each other. The following weeks were a blur of appointments and heart-wrenching confessions. Rachel and Mark supported Jenna and Joe as they delved into the traumas of their past, trying to piece together the puzzle that had shaped their present. They learned of a legacy of pain and deceit that had been passed down from one generation to the next, a cycle that had claimed victims in ways they never could have imagined. And as Rachel held her sister tightly, she realized that the bond between them was not just one of blood, but of shared experience and a commitment to breaking that cycle. They were two strong women, standing together in the face of their demons, ready to rebuild their family on a foundation of truth and love. But the secrets didn't stop there. As Rachel dug deeper into her own past, she began to question the memories she had held dear. What had she missed? Who had she been blind to? The realization that her childhood was not the idyllic haven she had believed it to be shook her to her core. Yet, she knew that in this painful process of discovery, there was also an opportunity for growth and understanding. With each revelation, Rachel felt the fabric of her life unravel and then slowly mend, stitch by stitch. And as they all worked to heal, Rachel found that her relationship with her sister grew stronger than ever before. They had survived the storm, and now, standing in the aftermath, they could see each other clearly, scars and all. Rachel knew that the future would bring more challenges, but she also knew that with her husband by her side and her family supporting her, she could weather any storm. The story of Rachel and her family was no longer a simple tale of a birthday gone awry, but a complex tapestry of love, loss, and redemption. It was a testament to the power of truth and the resilience of the human spirit. And as Rachel looked into the eyes of her sister and her newfound friend Lily, She knew that they were all ready to weave a new narrative, one filled with hope and the promise of a brighter tomorrow.